On this week's NESN Patriots podcast, we will discuss Patriots' upcoming Super Bowl matchup against the LA Rams, and of course, we will recap their AFC Championship game win over the Chiefs. Hello and welcome to the NESN Patriots podcast. I'm Doug Kai, joined as always by Zach Cox. Zach, how are you doing?
Doing well, Doug. Glad we made it back from Kansas City in actually the exact amount of time that we expected to. Unlike, I know nobody likes to hear about these sports writer travel stories, but basically like 75% of the Patriots beat got either seriously delayed getting to Kansas City or seriously delayed getting back from Kansas City. We were actually pretty
Or
perfect.
in Kevin Duffy's case, both.
Both. Had to drive from Omaha, some people had to drive from Charlotte back to Boston. Big old mess. Yeah. We lucked out. We got to hang out, have some nice barbecue, and I think our flight left, 25 minutes later than scheduled?
Something like that. 25-50.
Fingers crossed we'll have some similar luck going to Atlanta next week.
Yes, so let's talk about why we are going to Atlanta. Well, I guess we were going to go to Atlanta regardless, but the Patriots are going to Atlanta because they made the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 53.
Third in a row.
Against the Los Angeles Rams. It's another beat LA situation for New England, Boston. Patriots beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday night at Arrowhead Stadium.
Incredible game.
I was just going to say it was pretty boring.
Depends what you're into.
Overtime game, trading touchdowns there at the end. Patriots got the ball in overtime, scored, won the game. We will go all over that. Let's just first get into overtime because that's kind of a hot debate right now. I have zero problem with the current NFL overtime rules. I don't mind the college overtime rules, but I wouldn't want it to come to the NFL because it's not real football. Yeah. You're just starting the ball from the 35-yard line and then either trying to score a touchdown or kick a field goal. That's not how football works. There's this whole thing called, special teams and kickoffs and everything. So I think that you have 60 minutes to decide a game. And if you can't decide it in that time, then I have no problem going to sudden death once overtime starts. And I didn't even really have a problem with a field goal deciding it before they changed the rule in 2011 or 2012. But, if you want to win the game, win it in the first 60 minutes. And if you want to win the game, stop the opposing team on defense once they get the ball in overtime. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think from a pure entertainment standpoint, I prefer the college overtime to the NFL overtime just because it's the craziness of going from the 25-yard line or whatever it is every single time. But that really wouldn't be feasible in the NFL, especially with NFL kickers. You can literally just kick a field goal in the first play of overtime if you really want to. I've heard some people mention, be like, you can start it at like the 45 or at the 50 instead. Maybe, I guess that could be fine. But yeah, overall, especially now that you need to score a touchdown on that first drive to end the game, I think if you go out and you score a touchdown in the first drive of overtime, you should win the game. I agree with the change that they made a couple years ago that you can't just get it and kick a field goal because I think that was a little cheap on some occasions where you can kind of receive the kickoff, go 30 yards downfield, and then win the game with a 45, 50-yard field goal. I agree with that change, but the way it currently is, it's fine. You get some real football in overtime, and if you don't want if you don't want the coin toss to kind of be the end-all be-all, stop the other team. Do what the Los Angeles Rams did. They stopped. They lost the coin toss, then they stopped the Saints. They had an interception, and then they scored on their first possession, and then they won the game. So yeah, this is something that people are always going to complain about when their team is on the wrong end. I'm sure if the Chiefs won the coin toss and went down and scored a touchdown right away, Patriots fans would be kind of clamoring for overtime rule changes. But I don't know. I think it's fine how it is.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, one team, both conference championship games went into overtime. One team who won the coin toss lost. One team who won the coin toss won. So, I don't know why this is just such a hot debate right now. In the most current iteration of this rule, it was split 50-50. So, let's talk about the game, Patriots-Chiefs. Patriots, it wasn't quite as complete of a performance as their win over the Los Angeles Chargers, but it was on the road. It was against Kansas City Chiefs, who were probably, going into that game considered the best team in the NFL. And the Patriots really came out hot, scored 14 unanswered points going into the half. like I said before, kind of traded touchdowns there at the end to win it at overtime. But, I mean, considering the opponent, considering the environment, considering that it was on the road, Patriots answered a ton of questions, and it was probably their most impressive win of the season. I mean, there's a case to be made for that win over the Chargers, but, I mean, considering the circumstances of this game, Patriots kind of exceeded all expectations, I think.
Yeah, I think you have to say that as well. I mean, everybody's going to remember the fourth quarter of this game because it was just ridiculous. I mean, it was 17-7 Patriots going into that fourth quarter, and then 25 minutes later, it's 37-31.
Right.
I think there are 38 points scored in the fourth quarter alone, and that's not even counting overtime. But it's going to get kind of lost to history. But in the first half, the Patriots defense had the best 2 quarters they've played all season, easily. Even going back to that Chargers game 2 weeks ago where they just basically kind of destroyed the Chargers for most of that game. They all had 0 points in the first half. They led 14-0 at halftime. I think the Chiefs had negative yardage deep into the second quarter. I want to say they only had like 32 total yards in the first half. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me.
Even by the end of the game, they had less than 300 yards.
Yeah. Basically, the only play they allowed in the first half was that long catch to the 42-yard catch to Tyreek Hill, which ended up being Tyreek Hill's only catch of the game. Tyreek Hill shut down for the game. Travis Kelce shut down for most of the game. He did have the touchdown. Did draw a pass interference call on J.C. Jackson, who I'm sure we'll get into in a bit, did not play his best game. Actually, probably played his worst game in this game. But overall, just against an offense that has so many weapons and against a Chiefs defense that isn't great, obviously, but had been playing significantly better, especially up front. I mean, that's a very, very good pass rush, and they didn't even get close to Tom Brady this entire game. I think they had something like 6 or 7 total pressures in the whole game. All around, just a very impressive performance, and this was one of the best Patriots games I've seen probably ever. This
happens every year, though. That's the funny thing is that like Super Bowl 49 was one of the best games ever. Super Bowl 51 was one of the best games ever. I know it didn't go great for Patriots fans, but Super Bowl 52 was one of the best games ever, and now you're talking about this being one of the best games ever too. Just an instant classic.
Yeah, this game actually reminded me a lot of Super Bowl 51 against the Atlanta Falcons. Not from the comeback standpoint, because the Patriots, if any team had a comeback, it was the Chiefs in this game. But this was a game where we got back to our hotel in Kansas City at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was after this game, and I had to just go and immediately rewatch the fourth quarter. Because it was one of those games where so many things happen that you just kind of forget moments that would be kind of major, like top highlights in any other game. This was just, there was so much kind of activity going on in that fourth quarter and overtime, and the Patriots, they did what they had to do. They obviously let the Chiefs get back into this game, but those last 3 drives were basically as well as we've seen kind of Rob Gronkowski, Julian Edelman, Tom Brady play this entire season.
Yeah, so on defense, the Patriots kind of surprised everyone. They put Stephon Gilmore on Sammy Watkins, which wasn't that big of a surprise, especially since those guys faced off in Week 6. They were teammates with the Bills. But J.C. Jackson lined up against Travis Kelce, which was a huge surprise to me. I thought if any cornerback would do that, it would be Stephon Gilmore. And then they had Jonathan Jones on Tyreek Hill. Keon Crossan also got a few snaps on him, led up the 42-yard catch. But, I mean, I almost feel like he didn't get enough, credit for this game. Maybe it's because he didn't talk afterwards, but Jonathan Jones was kind of masterful at covering Tyreek Hill. He didn't allow a single catch to him all game. He did have, did he draw a holding penalty?
I don't. Oh yeah, he had one on the very first drive.
He had a penalty on the first drive, but after that he didn't let up anything to Tyreek Hill, and they also had Devin McCourty helping out over the top on Tyreek Hill, which obviously played a huge part and was obviously very beneficial to Jonathan Jones as well. But I mean, Stephon Gilmore did a good job against Sammy Watkins early in the game. He did a great job.
One long catch.
Right, 54-yarder to Sammy Watkins. He did a good job against Travis Kelce late in the game. J.C. Jackson just had really a tough matchup, I think, against Travis Kelce, because J.C. Jackson's not quite as tall as Stephon Gilmore. He's like 5'10". He did get beat for the touchdown. Like you said, he did have the defensive pass interference. He had two of them.
Yeah.
Two DPIs.
Two of them on the same. Or he had 2 defensive pass interferences and a defensive holding.
Yeah.
He let up the touchdown to Kelce, let up a long catch to Demarcus Robinson on that final Chiefs drive that set up the game tying field goal.
27-yarder. He also let up a long catch to Sammy Watkins, but he was also very clearly
Yeah, he kind of got screwed on that play.
Yeah, Chris Conley ran into him. It should have been a penalty. They didn't call it. Chris Conley basically just lowered his shoulder into J.C. Jackson about 6 yards down the field and wasn't flagged. But, I think still, I wouldn't say that J.C. Jackson had like a terrible performance. It wasn't his best game. I think that he could probably bounce back next week against the Rams, depending on what his matchup is. But overall, solid performance by the Patriots defense. I think that their run defense was also really good in this game. They only allowed 30 yards on 10 carries to Damian Williams. Patrick Mahomes also had 2 carries for 11 yards. Damian Williams did have the touchdown. But overall, I think the Patriots run defense kind of proved themselves in this game that they aren't going to be a sieve the entire, like they might have been late in the season.
Definitely. I mean, Damian Williams had 10 carries for 30 yards. Again, like you said, he did have the touchdown, but he's a guy who had gone over 100 yards in two of his previous 4 games since taking over from for Kareem Hunt late in the season. And yeah, the Patriots defense just overall. Kyle Van Noy probably had his best game of the season. Dante Hightower had a very strong game in a lot of respects. Trey Flowers was all over the place in the backfield.
Landon Roberts had a tackle for a loss.
Roberts
and good coverage too.
Yeah,
in that game.
Adam Butler was involved in the backfield there. So
John Simon had a couple plays.
Overall, this was. Obviously, they did give up 31 points, so you can't call it a perfect performance by any means by the Patriots defense.
But it's against the Chiefs.
Against an offense this talented, that was if you watch how this game played out, it was a very, very promising performance by the Patriots defense.
On offense, a lot of credit goes out to the offensive line, who had a really good game. Obviously, there were times when they didn't get quite enough of a push on the Chiefs defensive line, but that's going to happen. As you said earlier, only 7 pressures all game. They let up 1 quarterback hit, no sacks. Patriots had over 170 yards on the ground. It was 48 carries for 176 yards with 4 touchdowns. One of those touchdowns came from Sonny Michel on 4th and short. It was an 11-yard score. Rex Burkhead had the last 2 touchdowns of the game on the ground. Patriots only averaged 3.7 yards per carry, but just the fact that they were able to win the game, get 176 yards on the ground, and really commit to the run for pretty much all 5 quarters, really, despite the fact that they weren't averaging 4 yards per carry, does tell you that the offensive line was doing its job to create enough room there for the Patriots to continue to move the ball over and over again.
Yeah, I know you wrote about them after the game, but I still feel like this offensive line isn't kind of getting recognized as much as it should. Because on one hand, you kind of get it because it's an offensive line. Offensive line talk isn't kind of sexy or headline grabbing, but if you look at what this team has done in the last month, really, over the last 4 games, ever since that Steelers loss, which was kind of a low point for the offensive line. They blocked reasonably well, but they had a bunch of dumb penalties, and they just kind of they were very, very disjointed in that game. But since then, they played 4 games. Tom Brady's been sacked 2 times, neither of which has come in the postseason. And the Pats have rushed for 273, 244, 155, and 176 yards. That's just a dominant performance by the offensive line, and I think you have to include fullback James Devlin and Rob Gronkowski into that category as well. Because
Dwayne Allen too.
Yep, Dwayne Allen too. They've all been. It's just been kind of a fantastic unit lately, and I think it just continues to go back to Dante Scarnecchia, who is. I've seen some people say over the last couple of days that he deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame, and I think he does. I mean, I don't know all the offensive line coaches in NFL history, but it's hard to imagine a guy who's kind of done a better job for as long as he has than Scarnecchia, especially if you look at the unit that the Patriots have right now. I know they're all they've been pretty kind of cohesive throughout the season, so I think some people kind of forget how they all came here. There's not a single 1st or 2nd round draft pick in this entire offensive line. I mean, they do have the 1st round draft pick in Isaiah Wynn, but he hasn't played a snap all season because he's been hurt. I mean, you got Joe Tooney 2nd round pick, Shaq Mason 4th round pick, or Joe Tooney 3rd round pick rather, Shaq Mason 4th round pick, Marcus Cannon 5th round, Trent Brown 7th round, and then David Andrews undrafted. So all of these guys were kind of mid to low round to undrafted finds that I mean, there's a reason that they were drafted that late. They obviously had some sort of kind of flaw or need some need for development in their game when they came to the NFL, and Dante Scarnecchia has helped turn them into one of the NFL's best offensive lines.
Yeah, it's really one of the best offensive lines that Scarnecchia has coached for the Patriots too. I think that there's a case to be made for the 2007 unit who had Matt LIII and who was it, Nick Kazzer at that point at right tackle. Dan Copen, Logan Mankins, and who was the right guard? Steve Neal at that point?
Probably Steve Neal.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that was a really solid offensive line. They had a really solid offensive line in 2011, but this one's right up there with it. And you mentioned the Hall of Fame. Another guy who's kind of getting some Hall of Fame chatter right now is Julian Edelman, and that's because he's one of the best postseason performers in NFL history. He had kind of a redemptive performance. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now, where he was kind of the GOAT on 2 of 3 plays. He almost touched a punt. He might have touched it. I don't think we'll ever fully know whether he touched it or not, but it was ruled that he didn't touch the punt. It looked like he muffed a punt, and the Chiefs were going to score off that play. They reversed the ruling, said that the ball didn't touch Julian Edelman as he was kind of trying to feel it like an infielder. And then 2 plays later, the ball clanged off his hands and was intercepted. But he had a massive fourth quarter, wound up with 7 catches, 96 yards. He's second in postseason history and with receptions. He's, I think, 4th in postseason receiving yards. If he gets 44 yards in the Super Bowl, then he'll be second or he'll be tied with Michael Irvin if he gets 44 yards. He'll pass Michael Irvin if he gets 45 yards for second all-time in postseason receiving yards. I mean, he's basically put together an entire fantastic season throughout his postseason career, and he's not really even that high up as far as wide receivers go for career postseason games. He's played 17 games. He's 13th among wide receivers in postseason appearances. If you extrapolate his last, I think, 5 or 6 years over a 16-game season, he would have 128 yards, 1,600-yard season, 4 touchdowns. His touchdown numbers aren't that high in the postseason, but, I mean, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. I don't know what will happen when it comes down to it, when he retires. He doesn't have the regular season stats, but there are other guys in the Pro Football Hall of Fame like Lynn Swann, like Joe Namath, like Kurt Warner, who also didn't have the regular season stats, who did most of their work in the postseason, who did make the Hall of Fame. So it's going to be a really interesting case. Doubt he'll be a first ballot guy or anything, but I think that the possibilities opening up, the more of these performances that Edelman has, that he could eventually actually sneak his way into Canton, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we talked about Julian Edelman's playoff numbers a lot last week, and he basically kept that same pace. I mean, over his last now 11 playoff games, he's basically averaging 100 yards per game and 8.5, 9 catches per game, which is just ridiculous. I mean, especially considering he's played on so many Patriots teams that have had weapons elsewhere, and this isn't a case where every year he's playing without Rob Gronkowski and without kind of a viable number 2 receiver. Rob Gronkowski's been on the field for a lot of these games. I mean, early in his career, there were some other weapons around. He had Danny Amendola for a lot of those years. He had a lot of guys like James White, a lot of the running backs for a lot of those years, and he's just the number 1 guy that Tom Brady looks to in all of these games, especially late in the game. I mean, that final drive where he converted 2 third and 10s. In that final drive in overtime, and then Rob Gronkowski had another one later in that same drive. It's just remarkable how teams should know that this is where Tom Brady is going to go in these clutch situations. And I'm sure teams do know that this is where he's going to go, and yet Julian Edelman continues to be just ridiculously productive in the postseason. I don't know. It's always kind of tough when you debate Hall of Fame credentials because there's so many different criteria to weigh. But I think if Julian Edelman comes out and has another type of game like this in the Super Bowl and the Patriots win the Super Bowl, it's going to be very easy to make the argument that he should be in the Hall of Fame, especially for those guys that you mentioned before, like Kurt Warner, Lynn Swann, guys that are really known for their postseason performance. Terrell Davis that have made it in there despite not having kind of 15-year, ridiculously productive regular season careers. Yeah,
and I mean, it's also, I wrote this in an article this week, that it's not just him benefiting from playing with Tom Brady. I mean, guys like Deion Branch, Wes Welker, Troy Brown, all played as many or, right around the same amount of postseason games as Julian Edelman has, and Edelman's stats are better across the board. And he averages more yards per playoff game than Rob Gronkowski. I mean, Rob Gronkowski obviously is a surefire Hall of Famer. There's just something to be said about Julian Edelman really upping his performance in the postseason. I think that if they do win a Super Bowl this year, that would also increase his chances because then he'd be a 3-time Super Bowl winner. He's never made a Pro Bowl. He's never made an All-Pro team. It would be pretty strange for a guy to get into the Hall of Fame without those honors on his resume. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to argue at this point. He's also got a passing touchdown in the playoffs, which I guess helps a little bit there as well. Let's not get too deep into the weeds on the Rams. Are you kind of done with the AFC Championship game?
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything, yeah.
I agree. We'll get deeper into the weeds on the Rams next week.
Got a long ways to go.
Certainly, and we're leaving for Atlanta on Sunday. We're going to have tons of coverage, so obviously keep it on NESN.com, keep it on, watch out for our videos and everything that we'll be doing on there. We're doing a live show. I don't know if this is out there yet. I'll just keep it at that. We're doing a live show here. I'll twist that into something else. We're doing a live show before the game with Matt Chatham.
Yes.
And we'll obviously talk about that next week on this podcast as well. But one point that I definitely have to make on the Super Bowl is that I think that the Chiefs are a better team than the Rams.
Yes.
Patriots just beat the Chiefs on the road at Arrowhead Stadium, one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. Perhaps, throughout the regular season, the best team in the NFL. And now they're playing a Rams team who I believe is weaker at a neutral site at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. I'm not surprised that the Patriots are favored in this game. And if anything, I'm a little bit surprised that they're not favored more in this game. I guess what it really comes down to is that the Patriots finished 11-5 this season, while the Rams were 12-4, 13-3, 12-4. So they technically had a better regular season. But one thing that I really point to here on the Rams side is that running back Todd Gurley is banged up, and they don't have Cooper Kupp, and their offense and Jared Goff, their quarterback in general, just has not been quite as efficient, not quite as productive since Cooper Kupp was lost with that torn ACL and since Josh Reynolds has taken over the slot. So I think there's reason for Patriots fans to be optimistic heading into this game.
I agree. I get the same sense. My sense coming out of the Chargers game and going into this Chiefs game was feeling pretty confident that the Patriots did have a very good chance of winning the game, and I predicted them to win the game. I'm feeling that same sense right now. Obviously the Rams are a very good team. It's not like they've kind of snuck their way into the Super Bowl by any means. They were one of the NFL's best teams for the entire season. But like you said, when you look at the roster on both sides, I think the Chiefs might have the stronger roster than the Rams do. I think the Sean McVay factor is going to be interesting. We don't know how. Obviously, he's been a kind of sensation ever since he took over last year. Never coached in a Super Bowl before, so we'll see how this kind of stage affects him. The Rams obviously have some very good players, but their number one receiver, Brandon Cooks, I guess. Is he their number one receiver? Is Robert Woods technically their number one?
Robert Woods might be their number one, but they're kind of 1A and 1B.
One of their number one receivers is Brandon Cooks, a player who spent all of last season in New England, who Bill Belichick and the Patriots coaching staff know very, very well. I'm sure they know of all of his shortcomings that Patriots fans like to complain about last year. So I think that there's a good chance of shutting down a guy like that. I think Todd Gurley is by far the most dangerous player in this Rams offense. Like you said, hasn't been 100%. I think he only carried the ball like 5 times against the Saints on Sunday. He said it wasn't
4 times for 10 yards.
4 times for 10 yards. He said it wasn't because he was hurt, but just because he was playing sorry. I think just basically he was like, yeah, I sucked. That's why I wasn't getting the ball, which also isn't probably the greatest thing for the Rams right now. I don't know. I think he's the most dangerous player on their offense. We'll see if he's 100%. And over on the defense, I think it's going to be all about whether the Patriots can stop Aaron Donald. It's going to be kind of. I don't know if it's the same situation as we always talk about with the pass rushers, where we always kind of hype up these guys and then they don't really make much of an impact. Aaron Donald's a different kind of player because he's in the middle of the play. It's not if you keep him away from Tom Brady, that doesn't mean he's basically kind of completely neutralized for the game. He's a guy that can really affect an offense in every single way. But that's just kind of like an early look at the Rams. Obviously, like you said, we'll get much, much deeper into this matchup over the course of the next week. But I'm with you. I'm feeling I'm leaning heavily Patriots right now.
I think that one thing about Aaron Donald, he's obviously kind of an undersized guy. One advantage that the Patriots might have on their offensive line over other teams is that Joe Tooney, our left guard, center David Andrews, and right guard Shaq Mason are all also kind of smaller, quicker guys. So, Aaron Donald might have even more success against a stronger player who's not quite as quick, whereas those guys up front might be able to handle him a little bit better. I think that's where the Patriots will shift all of their attention to, and I don't think there's really a ton of reason to be too scared of the other pass rushers on that defense. Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald are the two big ones, but beyond that, you've got Dante Fowler, who's he's a fine player. He's not anything special. He's not Melvin Ingram. He's not Joey Bosa. He's not Justin Houston. He's not Dee Ford. all players that the Patriots have neutralized in the last few weeks. But beyond that, beyond those two guys in Donald and Sue, there's not a lot of other dangerous pass rushers on that team. One thing that I will say, I actually want to say two things. One of which is that both these teams are very healthy. The Rams only lost 2 starters throughout the course of the season. Dominique Easley started the first 3 games of the season at outside linebacker, former Patriots defensive tackle. He's out for the season. And then Cooper Kupp, who we already mentioned. Patriots basically only lost 1 pseudo-starter this season, and that was Juwan Bentley, their rookie linebacker. He probably would be playing that Landon Roberts role, maybe playing a little bit more than him. But both teams definitely in a good situation injury-wise, depending on how Todd Gurley looks. One other thing I just want to mention is that, so last night I totaled up all of the Patriots' Super Bowl appearances. The Patriots collectively have played in 86 Super Bowls. Rams have collectively played in 5 Super Bowls, and that's all C.J. Anderson, Aqib Talib, Brandon Cooks, and Sam Shields. And the weird thing that was happening on my Twitter mentions last night, and it's been a handful of people, but it's been more than one. So people are almost like kind of gloating that Brandon Cooks only played like 7 minutes of a Super Bowl last year and got knocked out with a concussion. It's like, why are we happy about this? First of all, the Patriots might have won the Super Bowl if Brandon Cooks played the whole game. Second of all, the guy got a concussion. It's not like he could have he probably shouldn't have backtracked on the play, but it's a former Patriots player who could have helped you. I don't know why we're celebrating and gloating over the fact that he only played in half a Super Bowl. Yeah. Patriots already have the very distinct advantage as far as Super Bowl experience goes. You don't need to downcut the Rams 5 games because Brandon Cooks played half a game.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a situation where people weren't super thrilled with Brandon Cooks last year, even though he was very productive. He did have his shortcomings, which we've talked a lot about. It was a bit of a dumb play to run straight backward into Malcolm Jenkins, but it's not like Brandon Cooks did this and then kind of said, "Screw you guys, I'm out of here." He got traded.
Yeah.
There's a weird kind of sentiment surrounding Brandon Cooks in kind of the Patriots fan community. To me, I do think that, I don't know, maybe people think that he was just overrated last season, so they kind of hold that against him.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a weird spot. And then even though he did get hurt, Tom Brady still ended up having the best game basically ever for a quarterback in the Super Bowl. So I don't know. It's weird. I'm interested to kind of dig deeper into this Brandon Cooks, just Brandon Cooks in general this week. I would say that I'm looking forward to talking to him in Atlanta, but as someone who covered Brandon Cooks for a whole year last year, not expecting him to say a whole lot.
Maybe he's opened up now.
Maybe I'm more interested to hear
Maybe he's more friendly.
What other people have to say about Brandon Cooks. because and I'm interested to see what he can do in this game, whether it's kind of a situation where Patriots are going to be kind of, I don't want to say proven wrong, but whether he's going to kind of show them why he could have helped them more this year, or whether it's going to be, oh yeah, that's Brandon Cooks, that's why they got rid of him.
There's no real obvious matchup for Cooks in the Super Bowl. It would either be, maybe they'll put Jonathan Jones on him, since apparently Jonathan Jones can shut down Tyreek Hill. But it'll be interesting to see what the matchups are. But as we said, we'll get into those more next week when we do this podcast. I also have a question to ask Brandon Cooks, and I won't put it out there yet, but we'll see if he answers it whenever I get a chance to talk to him. And if he does, then look out for that story. But that will, I think, pretty much do it for this week's NESN Patriots podcast. Since we do have 2 minutes, let's play America's favorite game real quick.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. We've been, a little bit more serious on these podcasts. We've been running up against the time. So this is where we name a player that we've never heard of and see if we can guess where they went to college. And my guy is cornerback Darius Williams. Darius spelled Darius.
It's like serious Darius.
Yes.
He went to West Virginia.
I'm going to say Temple. He went to UAB.
Ooh, that's tough.
Interesting.
That's tough. All right, let's do one more.
Played 1 season at D3 Marietta College before going to
That was
UAB.
my second guess.
One more.
All right. I'm going to pick defensive lineman Sebastian Joseph Day.
Sebastian Joseph Day. I'm going to go with Wyoming.
I'm going to say Louisiana Lafayette.
He went to Rutgers.
Wow. Damn.
I think I should have known that.
Sebastian Joseph. Never
Gay.
heard of Sebastian Joseph.
I
Gay.
have not either. But we both failed.
We'll have to talk to him next week.
Yes, all about Rutgers and whether they pray to the altar of
Speaking of Rutgers, one last
McCourties.
note. There's a report out there that Greg Schiano could become maybe the Patriots' next defensive coordinator, or at least I think Ian Rappaport's report was that he is likely to join the Patriots coaching staff as in a top defensive role.
Right.
Whatever that means, whether that means he will be the defensive coordinator, whether that means he's kind of replaced Brian Flores as linebackers coach and somebody else is going to be over him, and obviously none of that is confirmed or anything yet or finalized, but interesting move, not totally surprising move, I don't think. I think some of us kind of saw this coming after Schiano chose to leave Ohio State to pursue NFL opportunities. But yeah, it would definitely be an interesting move to bring in a kind of veteran guy from outside of the organization to have such a prominent role.
Yeah, I think it's either going to be Schiano or Brendan Daly who's filling that defensive coordinator role. At this point, I'd say that Schiano is the odds-on favorite. But if something doesn't work out there, if he goes to another team, gets a better offer, whatever, then it probably would be Brendan Daly in that role next year. But yeah, definitely interesting. He's got a history with Devin McCourty, Jason McCourty, Deron Harmon. We'll see how many of those guys are back next year. But yeah, Bill Belichick really respects Greg Schiano, and they've had a relationship for a long time. So certainly not surprising that he would come into that role with the Patriots. But that will do it. Keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow Zach on Twitter at ZachCoxNESN. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kide. If you have a question for either one of us, tweet it to us.